Well, Wild fans, it's mercifully over. This, 2023-2024 season is officially over. Even though we lost to Seattle by a score of 4-3, at the end of the day, that really doesn't matter because there's a lot a lot to look forward to, a lot to reflect on, a lot to, potentially change over the next several months going into the 24-25 season. But, yeah, like I say, the season is over. The Wild are out of the playoffs for the, second time in like 12 years or something like that. But again, being a Wild fan for as long as I have been, and just kind of knowing the history of Minnesota sports, it's probably for the better, just because it's like I've seen, since my real strong fandom, first round exits pretty much every year, which, with the exception of the 03 season, is a pretty common occurrence. And the last time the Wild won a playoff series was in 2015, so maybe missing the playoffs isn't necessarily a bad thing, especially when there's a lot to look forward to in the future. I mean, a lot of the prospects stepped up this year for the Wild, and I know that the Iowa Wild also had a lot of issues too, but again, when Minnesota and Iowa have a lot of injury issues, and Iowa really doesn't have a necessarily chance to replenish that, just because a lot of the key pieces for the Iowa Wild were up in Minnesota for most of the year and this, that, and the other thing. But hey, I mean, at the end of the day, we did what we needed to do. Here we are. It's just, we knew this year, especially me, I knew this year was probably going to be a tougher year just in general. I mean, between Dean Evison getting fired, Spurgeon going down at the beginning of the year, Hines coming in, Guerin, with those contracts for Hartman, Zuccarello, Foligno, and Foligno ended up being injured by the end of the year for, the rest of the year. Yeah, there's a lot to digest, and there's going to be a lot of really key decisions I need to be made over these next, I'd say, several months, if not a couple years or so. Especially because this is like going into the 24-25 season. This is the last year of the extremely hard buyouts. The $15 million dead cap between Parise and Suter's contract. This is like the last upcoming season that we really have to worry about that. So going into 25-26, that could really be the time where the Wild take over, turn, it around, and potentially make a deep run. But I also wouldn't be surprised if the Wild make the playoffs in 2024-2025, especially because, again, going into this year, I knew it was going to be a tough season, especially when your captain is basically all but out from, the end of preseason to the end of the regular season, or the end of, the 23-24 Wild season. I think Spurgeon played like 10 games total this year, 12 games total. It was something like that. I mean, it wasn't a lot of games. It was basically out since New Year's, so if that tells you anything. And then the contracts to Hartman, Zuccarello, Foligno. That'll be kind of interesting to see what the Wild do going forward there. But, hey, I mean, it is what it is at the end of the day. It's just kind of looking like a Fenton, situation where they just kind of sign guys for the sake of signing guys. But it is what it is. So I'm not too worried about that right now, especially with the cap contracts and the cap issues going into 24-25. But hey, I mean, the future's bright because Olgren looked good. Kuznetsov looks pretty good. Kaprizov stepped into that leadership role. Eriksson Ek still looks like a dog. Brock Faber. I mean, Brock Faber is looking like a potential stud. I mean, he's probably going to finish second or third in the Calder behind Bedard, but that's just because, well, Bedard is more of an offensive goal scorer, flashy, sexy, McDavid type, where Boldy's more of a physical defenseman, sort of, a guy that you really don't expect to, plot 60 goals in the back of your net, but at the same time is still a very, very, very key piece to any team, but... Faber looked really good. Rossi stepped up this year, something big, which was good to see because, like I said, going into this year, going into the 23-24 season, I said, if Boldy can show me like 15 goals, 30 points, stuff like that, I knew, then I know that he fits and he could be a potential future piece for this team. Well, he exceeded those expectations, so, I mean... is going to look like a future piece for this team for sure. And I'm very excited to see that. But, yeah, I mean, like I say, this is just kind of my post, last game of the season, just ramblings and stuff like that. Because once we get into the draft and the free agency and cuts and this and that and the other thing, it'll be kind of interesting to see, especially because... now that Fleury has re-signed for, 1 year, $2.5 million or something like that. Kind of right around $2.5 million for his last season, because he basically made it all but official that the 24-25 season will be his last. So between him, Wallstedt, and Gustafsson, do they trade Gustafsson? Do they keep... like I said, probably the goaltending is going to be the biggest thing looking forward here. Like, does Gustafsson stay? Does he get traded? Wallstedt, how does he look? Is he finally going to be that guy for the future? But, like I say, at the end of the day, I'll leave that up to Guerin and, the offices and the coaching staff and stuff like that to make those decisions. But, I mean, I like what I've seen here. Just because, again, Gustafsson didn't have a great year, but at the same time, though, it's not like he had a ton of help in front of him, especially with all the injuries and roster turnover. There's only so much you can do there. But even though the season was a disappointment, even though the season was frustrating, even though the season is what I thought the season would be, painful, frustrating, blah, 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 etc., there's a lot to look forward to basically going forward. So, but like I say, it's finally done, Wild fans. It's finally done. So now I can actually go and enjoy the playoffs, and like I say, we'll reconvene as we need to. Plus, we're also only about a week away from the NFL draft, which these guys right here, the Vikings, could potentially make some pretty big moves, some pretty big trades, this and that, the other thing. It'll be kind of interesting to see what the draft looks like for the Vikings this year, which of course, I'll definitely fill in and chime in when I can, and this and that and the other thing, but yeah, just because the wild season's over doesn't mean your boy is, finally off to just, go on vacation here, because it's like whenever the one season ends, the next season begins, and, won't be too much longer before we'll be getting ready to preview the 2024 Minnesota Vikings, as well as the 24-25 Minnesota Wild. The Twins aren't looking too good to start, if I'm being honest with you here, but then again, there's a lot of injuries and this and that. The other thing, there's 162 games. The Wild are like 6-11. It's not looking good to start, but again, it's literally April 18th. Not even a month into the MLB season, but yeah. And the Timberwolves are ready to make, a potential deep playoff push. Hopefully, maybe, please. I would not be mad if the Timberwolves actually ended the Minnesota Mail for Sports curse. Especially knowing the history of the Timberwolves. Again, a team that, over the last 15 plus years or so is lucky to win more than 25 games a season. And now is, a third seed in the West. I mean, it'll be interesting to follow and see what happens there, because if the Timberwolves can get it done, I would love that more than you would know, especially knowing the history of the Timberwolves over the last several years or so. But like I say, we'll just kind of wait and see there. But yeah, I mean, you know, sports fan season's never done. But yeah, I think I've rambled on long enough here, just kind of getting my thoughts and opinions out here. But there's a lot to look forward to, Wild fans, Vikings fans, and, you know, even Twins fans. I'm not 100% sure how I feel about us yet. The Timberwolves, you know, arguably are going on one of their best stretches they've had, arguably since they've been a franchise at this point. I mean, let's be honest here. More often than not, the Timberwolves, if they have a winning season, you know, like over 500, it's considered a win. But now the fact that they've made the playoffs over the last several years and this and that and the other thing, it's just more of a pleasant surprise than anything. But yeah, there's a lot to look forward to here. But yeah, I say that pretty much wraps this up. So until we meet again, this is Jacob. Have a good day.